Awesome. Thank you all so much for joining. We're going to get started in just a really brief moment. My name is Zarek Drozda. I'm the Executive Director of Data Science for Everyone. We are so thrilled to have you all here for today's discussion. This is our first event of 2024, so Happy New Year to you all, and coming back to the Data Science for Everyone community. On behalf of the coalition, welcome to Passport for Potential, Exploring K-12 Data Literacy Worldwide. I am just so excited to have everyone and all of our partners here on this call today. We have an amazing lineup of speakers. I've been looking forward to this event for a number of months now, and I'm really excited to kick off the new year with some representation from around the world, advocates who are forwarding data science, literacy, and data values globally. I'm going to share just a little bit briefly about Data Science for Everyone. On the next slide, Marisa, if you want to switch. We're a national initiative, coalition, and community based at the University of Chicago, striving to catalyze the adoption of data science and data literacy as a basic component of K-12 education. We originally catalyzed from a Freakonomics podcast, but the push for data literacy has since become a national movement with 3,000 or more education leaders in many states and districts around the country, while advancing data literacy education. We currently work on 4 things: raising awareness, gathering and catalyzing classroom resources, community building, and policy as it relates to data science education. On the next slide, I want to share a key component of our community building work. Involves holding events like the one that we're all joining today. Before we move on to officially starting this discussion, I wanted to quickly invite everyone to our programming if you are traveling to South by Southwest EDU this year in Austin, Texas from March 3rd to 7th. We have a full week of DS4E panels and meetups. We'll link them in the chat currently. So if you happen to be attending, please consider adding them to your schedule. We would love to connect with you if you plan on traveling to Texas. On the next slide, I would like to remind everyone before we get started in the conversation about the DS4E community standards. We welcome coalition members of all different backgrounds and levels of experience with data science education. And to create room for healthy and engaging debate, we've established a code of conduct that creates an environment of respect, inclusion, and effective communication. You can learn more about our community standards, including how to report any violations, on our website. And we'll also drop a link in the chat now for that information. On the next slide, before we dive into our panel discussion, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to our partner in this event, the world's largest lesson, which is an education outreach program co-organized by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization and UNICEF. And their important work with the Global Transcending Education Report and the findings that we're going to talk about in more depth today. In 2023, they launched the Transforming Education Survey, a research project centered on hearing and evaluating or elevating the voices of 37,000 students around the world. It was a huge project. And through this undertaking, they aim to honor children's feelings about the current state of education, explore their current reality in classrooms today, and what they think the purpose of education should be as students directly, and their own real world solutions they wanted to forward. One of the core findings from the report that we're really excited about is that globally, students feel that they are not learning enough about digital skills, like how to analyze and use data. Data analysis proved to be the #2 skill identified among students, second only to financial literacy, which itself is often a very data-driven topic. And it's not every day that the UN identifies a skill that is globally critical, let alone that claim comes from students directly. So, and especially in a world of data-driven technologies like AI, we clearly need to grow access to these opportunities both at home and abroad. So that's why I'm so excited to start off our first event this year with this partnership. And I would like to now introduce the world's largest lesson executive director, Alison Bellwood, to share more about the findings of this report and share a little bit about our new collaboration. Alison, if you want to take it away, I would love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Zarek, for that introduction and to help me learn a little bit more about data science for everyone. I just wanted to thank you for inviting us today. As you said, you're so excited about this event, so have we. Hello, everybody. Thanks for making time to be part of this conversation. My name is Alison Bellwood. I am the executive director of a program called The World's Largest Lesson. It's an initiative that works in partnership with UNICEF and UNESCO on a global level, really focused on an ambition around building sustainability education. And what we've been doing since 2015 is aligning all of our work to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we use those goals both kind of with and for in learning, and we have reached millions of children in many countries around the world in the last 8 years. Fundamentally, what we do is we create learning resources for teachers to use with children and young people in order to engage them in issues of sustainability and then give them some ideas and opportunities for taking action. We specifically, and in fact, increasingly now, we're focusing more on thinking about the skills and competencies that young people are going to need now and are going to need into the future as we face the sustainability issues, some of which we're seeing already and some of which we kind of anticipate will come. So we're doing a lot of work around that space, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And then just as DS4E advocates for sustainability, for data science in learning and in general, we advocate for education for sustainable development to be recognised within curriculums. Now, what I'm going to do is just take you through a couple of different kind of bits of our work, because I think that will help join the dots between our ambitions and the mission we follow and the mission that you guys all follow. And I've been seeing you coming up, your names in the chat and your work. And I think we've got some incredible synergies in our ambition here. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is competencies for sustainability. And, you know, what we talk about when we talk about those, we're thinking about what is it that is going to ensure that young people are both willing and able to take action for sustainability. So Zarek, if you could change the slide, please, or Marissa, that would be great. Thank you. So there are 5 different families of competencies that we propose are those that young people need in order to become truly able to act for sustainability, not just in the workplace in the future, but now in their homes, in their communities, at school, in their educational institutions, and more generally. So there are 5 different families of competencies. I'll talk about them in a bit more detail. But as you can see, they interlink and they intersect. They intersect with each other, but they also intersect with other skills domains. And when we look in more detail, you'll recognize some of the competencies as those existing in other parts of kind of education and the work we all do. These competencies kind of can evolve and develop over time in a young person. They don't kind of all get developed at the same time. They're not even sequential, but the power of them is the intersection between them and building a real sense of kind of knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and mindsets, all in a holistic way. Can you change the slide, please? Just to go into one level more detail, and I promise I won't go further, there are 17 competencies. And so you can see the families down the left-hand side, and then you can see what makes up the competencies in each of them. And I'll just draw your attention to the one in the middle, applying sustainability science, and on the right-hand side, harnessing data. So for us, harnessing data sits right there centrally as one of the really crucial competencies that we need to start developing in young people as we look to them to address the sustainability issues of our time and into the future. Next slide, please. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of what we mean when we talk about harnessing data in this context, it's about identifying and collecting data. It's about storing, cleaning, storing, visualizing, analyzing data, all for a purpose of monitoring, evaluation, and decision-making in this kind of area. And it sits alongside other STEM or science-related kind of competencies that are really quite enormous. Understanding and applying the planetary boundaries as a whole, very unexplored area. Utilizing regenerative practices is equally starting to kind of take a hold. You can see on the right-hand side at the bottom a quote here from one of the young people that we've been working with to develop this thinking. And she said in a focus group, learning how to analyze data is really important. We're so focused on the doing, we don't have time to reflect on what we've done. And these are the words from a young person who's an activist in this space. So she is part of the kind of big movement to try and bring communities and countries to the fore to fight for sustainability. And she's saying, you know, we're not even collecting data to even identify kind of what we've done and to help us know where to go next. Next slide, please. So that's something on competencies. Zarek referenced a piece of research we did last year, and that's connected to the competencies work in that we ran a survey with a playful, gamified survey with young people across the world last year. They were students between the ages of 10 and 19. And we were asking them to reflect on their learning, to reflect on their learning from the context of the post kind of COVID moment, because it ran at the end of 2022 as well, and to think about what they were getting from learning and their education and what they wanted to see more of. And you can see on this slide a real range of the kinds of data that we were gathering. We did ask about data literacy and data skills and how much they were spending time learning about data in the classroom. 14% of them said they were not learning anything at all about data. 41% said they were not learning enough. So that's 55% overall saying there's not enough of this going on in our classroom, we need more of it. There were other areas also that they highlighted. So from a digital point of view, developing digital skills like programming and coding, 41% said not enough and 20% said not at all. Then we looked at things like how to manage money in a budget. So 59% were saying they weren't learning enough or nothing at all about that. 44% eager to learn how to look after their own mental health, and 42% to look after how to understand other cultures, and also the same number to understand how to look after the planet more. So some really powerful insights from students themselves asking for their learning to change. And we did some open box data collection at the same time and we did a load of sentiment analysis from that. And the overwhelming kind of collective ask was summed up as, we need skills for the real world. So that's just a little bit of where young people are coming from. And then finally, we've been looking also at, well, what's our sector doing to try and, on the one hand, build the competencies we think we need young people to have for sustainability, to help provide young people with these kind of real world skills that they're asking for. So we've done a bit of mapping of lots of different sustainability education programs across the world. If you could move to the next slide. We have been looking at all of those competencies you saw. We've been then we've looked at 154 different organizations and programs that they run. We've looked at the materials they used. We haven't been able to look at the outcomes on learning. And we've just said, okay, how are they covering these competencies? Are they at all covering them? Or where does the balance of their kind of effort lie? And what this heat map shows is that, and I've highlighted those, the two with those two arrows, is that we're doing quite a good job globally of building values in young people around sustainability, particularly at the younger end of education, sort of K6. We're really focusing quite a lot on individual action, but there are some huge gaps. We need to do much more around things like systems thinking, things like circular design thinking, but really highlighting that there is very little focus at all on the use of data within sustainability learning. So how can gathering, collecting, visualizing, and using data to make decisions within a sustainability context kind of be woven in to programs that young people are part of? Informational skills, which are really linked closely to data, sort of how do you trust the data that you're gathering? How do you know? How do you share that carefully? There's a huge intersection between those two, and then there's no presence of that either. And then the other pink, just so you know, is political action, and moving us away from kind of this sense that it's all on us as individuals to both working collectively to drive change, but also then understanding how the kind of power structures lie, and how we can kind of identify levers that we can turn in order to change things at a kind of policy level. So that's a little bit of what we do. To move on from that, though, what we have been doing in a more kind of purposeful way is, if you could change to the next slide, please. We've made a start, we think, on doing some very introductory work to introduce the idea of using data within sustainability to teachers and to young people. And we've been doing that with one of the other members of DS4E, which is NetApp, a private sector company that's been really working closely with us to do this. And our ambition is really just to open the door to data literacy. We don't tend to get into the sort of depth of curriculum that you guys will be expert in. We're just trying to open the door to introduce the idea that data can be part of sustainability action, to use that kind of interested, purpose-led learning that many young people are kind of aspiring for, to give them a sense that data can be an important part of that, and to kind of pique their interest in it. And we've created a program called Become a Factivist. There's some lesson plans. There's also, this is the homepage to the website, and it's really cute when you go onto it. What students are doing is analyzing data. They're then preparing a kind of visualization of it, which you can upload. You can see thousands of them from young people. They're all linked to different goals. They talk a little bit about where the data comes from to validate it, and talk about why it matters. So I'm going to talk a bit more about that afterwards, but that is it for me. And I hope that it's framed the discussion that's about to come next. Over to you, Zarek.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alison. And seeing that the survey data on the different segments of maybe underemphasized skills was so helpful for me. I think it always underscores the importance of the use of data in building social systems and civic engagement so clearly. And I think that's a thread we don't want to lose. I'm really excited about this Factivist campaign to bring students into this conversation in a really, I think, accessible way that we're going to bring Alison back on stage at the end to just give a little bit more details on what that challenge will look like that we'll be announcing and running for the next 2 months, I believe. So very excited to hear more about that. I'm thrilled to have a group of experts here at the forefront of many conversations around education and data from around the world with us today to discuss more. We are joined by Fatuma Faarah, a campaign officer at Data Values Project, Mayuri Dhumal, a data and gender activist from India, Wesley Hedgepeth, the president of the National Council of Social Studies Teachers, and Hollylynne Lee, distinguished professor, mathematics and statistics education at North Carolina State University. To get us started and to launch into this amazing group conversation, I'm going to pose a question to each of our panelists. Then I'm going to open up for discussion generally and pool some questions from the audience that you all submitted through registration form. Additionally, if you have other questions that come up during the discussion, please drop those in the chat so we can engage with anything that comes up the audience wants to hear more about. So Fatuma, I want to start with you. The Data Values campaign that you work on is centered on challenging, I think, power structures in data, right, to ensure that we are all sharing the benefits of the collection and use of digital data and the way that we interact with that technology and the information that's collected. With the, I believe, also UN-sponsored project, you have had incredible visibility on data-related efforts globally and what folks are doing around the world using data for action. So I'd love if you could describe some examples of what motivated the need for the Data Values campaign, what gap you all saw that needed to be addressed. And then maybe secondly, why is it important to have students be part of that picture as we're building data literacy skills?
Awesome. Thank you so much for the questions, Zarek. Hello, everyone. My name is Fatuma Faarah, and I'm the campaign officer at the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. We are a network of over 700 stakeholders from around the world that's aiming to leverage the power of data to change minds, policies, and lives for the better. And so at the Global Partnership, our aim is to ensure that data can be put to good use to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So today I'm here to talk about a critical and pivotal campaign that we coordinate at the Global Partnership called the Data Values Campaign, which has a component that's focused on the importance of building data skills and literacy for greater equality at a broader level. But before I speak to the importance of data skills and literacy, I'm just going to highlight a few points about the campaign. And then we'll also hear from my colleague Mayuri, who's a young researcher in India, who's campaigning and building the data skills for many young women in rural India. So the Data Values Campaign is a global movement that came as a result of various surveys and consultations with individuals and organizations from around the world and across sectors as well. So we've done consultations with private sector, the public sector, academia, and civil society as well. And through these consultations, it was outlined that there's a need for those of us who are working in international development and the data space to have a stronger common vision and messaging on data ethics, data rights, data governance, and just overall data for equity. And so understanding this need and realizing that while data holds tremendous power for shaping more equitable and sustainable societies, and how we are yet to see the best available data to tackle some of the world's most pressing challenges, such as climate change or natural disasters, access to education, we founded and established what we call the Data Values Campaign. So the main aim of the campaign is to ensure that data systems help and empower people rather than harm and exclude them. And so it was launched in 2022, and now hundreds of people and organizations are engaged or are actively shifting how data systems are designed, how data systems are funded, how they're managed, so that everyone everywhere shares in the benefits of data collection and use. And then more importantly, the campaign really is centered on bringing in or bringing together diverse and often underrepresented voices and perspectives and expertise on issues around data and power, and really bringing attention to the issue that affects everyone, and uncovering the real harms that that existing data practices are causing, while sharing positive opportunities of data-driven approaches that can help address some of these challenges that are ongoing. And so now you're probably wondering, how are we collectively shifting data systems? How are we collectively creating systems that help and empower people instead of exclude and harm them? Well, through the campaign, we created something called the Data Values Manifesto, which is a 5 key call to action. It's composed of 5 calls to action, essentially focused and centered on inclusion and representation in data, accountable and participatory data governance, democratizing data skills and literacy, creating transparent data sharing and use, and then having and building more responsive data systems based on better funding and resources. So after I'll share the full manifesto and a few more details about the campaign in the chat, but I just really wanted to take a few minutes to go back and talk more about what it is that we're doing in terms of democratizing data skills and literacy for greater equality. So through the campaign, we highlight that everyone needs the skills and the confidence to understand and engage and communicate with data so that they can meaningfully participate in data systems and processes. And this is important for various reasons, mainly because building people's ability to think critically about data, make well-informed decisions, and increase data use by individuals and organizations allows them to meaningfully participate and have a say in terms of how their data is being collected, managed, funded, and used. Also, while most people think about data literacy, they often tend to think about it in terms of being able to navigate a spreadsheet of data or, statisticians or really technical things. But data literacy is much more broader. It's really the ability to critically interrogate data presented as facts and to use data for advocacy, decision-making processes, and really holding those in power accountable, and so much more. And so by building data skills, it also allows us to critically consider how we as individuals, our communities, and societies at large are being impacted by data. And also building data literacy means and allows people, including young students, to understand what data they share with others and on what terms, especially since we're in such a digital age, and how I think I read a stat recently that said about like 80% of internet users are people under the age of 25. And so really, it's really important that we start, teaching some of these skills at a young age in terms of what it means that, what do terms and conditions mean? What does it mean that, you're using your email address to sign up for a social media platform? Or, how are some of these corporations using the data that you share, your age or other sensitive information that you're putting, that you're sharing with some of these companies? What does that for a young person who may not necessarily understand or have the skills to fully make those decisions yet? And so, building the data literacy and data skills really fosters the ability for people to have the agency and the autonomy over their data and how they decide to share it. So with that said, I just want to end off, I know I'm a little over time, but a few recommendations on how to start building data skills. Number one is it could be built through in a variety of ways, having discussions like the ones that we're having today, holding workshops on data privacy and data governance, and really, opening conversations, starting conversations at a young age. And then my colleague Mayuri is also, who you're going to hear from next, I believe, is she's going to talk about a really practical and great example from the campaign on what data literacy looks like in action, and some of its positive impacts. And then finally, it's really important that as that data intermediaries, so for example, not the folks who are producing the data and not the ones who are at the receiving end, the data users, but those of us who are in the middle, who are the data intermediaries, really take a step forward and try to help bridge the knowledge gap and help increase participation and decision-making processes for those who are at the data using end. So that's it. I will pass it back to Zarek. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatuma. The stat you shared around just the number of young people that are online regularly engaging in digital information, I think was just really eye-opening. I also really appreciate the very actual recommendations at the end there, and ways that, the things that we should be paying attention to closely as we design experiences for students. So Mayuri, I think Fatuma set up a perfect segue to you. You would love to learn more about your work. And I think you've led some incredible research and advocacy in India. And I think in many cases helping interrogate how development metrics and we're thinking about sustainable development may often miss what's going on under the surface when we collect data. So I'd love if you could speak to how you've seen the use or misuse of data affect change in your research, and what that might mean for young people.
Yeah. Thank you, Zarek. Hi everyone, this is Mayuri from India, and first of all, good evening from India. So I'm very glad that Fatuma has already set a ground and given lots of information about data values campaign, and that gives me 1 more minute to talk more about my project directly than giving the background. So as a data values advocate, when I started my research, it was about water crisis and its impact on women's lives, and be it education or their health, or overall impact on their marriages as well in the scenario of India. Because I have seen many girls dropping out of the school because they are fetching water, and they're all time which was supposed to go for studies, they are giving it to collect water. And there I started thinking about how these all sustainable development goals are connected. And when India or the government of India is claiming that it is consistently performing really well in all these goals, I was worried about the data they are presenting. So I started searching for this data, and I found that there are many websites where, or the advertisers they are making, have numbers, and these numbers are huge numbers, like billions of households are getting tap water connections, or we are 100% open defecation free country now, because we have 100% households with the connected toilets to it. But in reality, when I was on ground, I was seeing that these toilets are being used as a storage rooms. Like there, people are storing firewood in that toilets because there is no water to put in it. If we need to clean the toilet, we need water. And if there is no water or a running functional tap water connection in that toilet, it is of no use. So that way, I found out that data literacy is a very important thing, because while collecting this data, it was just about infrastructure. It was talking about how toilet buildings are being built, they are in position, but none of this data was talking about its functionality or its access or its affordability as well. So we always say data is a new fuel, but to use this fuel properly, we need to spread the knowledge about this fuel first. If people don't know how to use this thing or how it is affecting their life, it is very problematic, and that again is creating a large divide between uh, the people who have the knowledge and those who don't have the knowledge. So with the example of my research, I started talking to these communities. I started collecting data with them, and then we realized that many of the people have tap water connection on the paper, which was shown in the data, which was shown on the websites as well. But in reality, there were no taps in their houses, and people were unaware about this thing. So they realized that their names and their data is being misused by the local officials, and they are showing the wrong data and results. And that's why they are able to say that they are achieving the goals. But people were unaware. And as soon as they came to know about it, I have seen people feeling empowered, sitting in front of that local body office, those officials, and asking for their right to water. And they made sure that last summer in June 2023, they received the tank, like water supply via tanker for the 3 months of the summer remaining. Because having an infrastructure or a tap water connection was a long-term thing. So they wanted a short-term solution for their problem. And I've seen people coming together, mobilizing each other, and creating a small-scale movement at the ground and ensuring that their demands are being fulfilled. So with this, I want to say that data literacy is a really a basic thing, like knowing that this thing is my information, my name or my household connections or anything for that matter. People should know that this is my information which is being used, and they should learn basic things about it, like how it is collected, how it is being used. And if they know this basic thing, they will automatically start asking for accountability. So with this thing, I want to say that data literacy should be promoted. We should ask people to translate this knowledge about data literacy in various languages, because if we don't bring this knowledge into their languages, we are not making it inclusive. Our efforts are not inclusive at all. So I have started at my place by translating all the knowledge which is available in English. I'm translating it into the local languages, which is Marathi in my case. And I'm trying to make sure that people are reading these things, people are being involved in the processes of data. Thank you, Zarek.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mayuri. I thought that was such a powerful example of the risks of over-relying on data, right? I could easily see a local NGO claiming success when in reality, those annotation systems are just not being used, or showing that we need to make sure that data is accessible to people across languages and cultures, and there aren't barriers to being able to access information. And I think that's just a great there are so many risks, opportunities and risks, and we need to make sure that we're bringing the full picture to students when they learn about the digital world and the power and limitations of data. And so Wesley, I would love to turn to you now, and bringing the perspective of a social studies educator and also representing that community. The world's largest lesson is launching this campaign for activism. And I think as when we think about sustainable development of social or political or economic systems, data is critical both for governments to make good decisions, and as Mayuri was sharing, it's also critical for individuals to be able to engage in civic advocacy and engage in the civic process. And so I'm wondering, what opportunities do you see for integrating, a focus on data literacy or data science into social studies subjects? And how do we think about, connecting data literacy with civic engagement or other content areas that might show up under social studies, general portfolio?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me today. I am thankful for the inclusion of the National Council for the Social Studies in this important conversation. I am Wesley Hedgepeth. I am a classroom teacher in Richmond, Virginia, and I am the current president of the National Council for the Social Studies. We are the largest association in the United States dedicated solely to social studies education, and our members are kindergarten teachers, our university faculty, our museum educators, our central office and state officials in social studies education, and everywhere else in between. So NCSS, as an association, our mission is, or excuse me, our vision is a world in which all students are educated and inspired for lifelong inquiry and informed civic action. And Mayuri's story just inspired me to hear the civic action that was taking place in her community, and that seeing the tangible results is really inspiring. The use of data science and literacy, it fits perfectly in the social studies classroom due to our reliance on documents. It also aligns with our C3 framework, which is the college, career, and civic life framework for social studies state standards. I'm going to put the link to that in the chat. And the framework is, it's actually in its 10th year, and now 75% of US states have used or adapted the framework in the adoption of their social studies standards. What it focuses on is an arc of inquiry. And so we have 4 dimensions. And in the social studies classroom, data fits in here perfectly. So we, as either teachers and or our students, are developing questions and we're planning inquiries. Maybe we're using the QFT method where we're formulating questions with our students, both compelling big questions and supporting questions to get closer to the answer by performing tasks. And the next dimension is applying our disciplinary concepts and tools. Our third is evaluating sources and using evidence. And so that's clearly where data fits in. And then the fourth dimension is that communicating and critiquing conclusions, right? Leading to action, informed action. Just to give you a brief example, and I'll give you a more detailed example in a minute, but in dimension 1, think about in maybe a government class or even a history class, we talk about census data. And maybe our big compelling question is, how does the census help us understand demographic changes in society? And so if that's our big question, then we're most certainly going to need data to analyze cleavages, political socialization, party identification, all sorts of different demographic information that students will then be able to corroborate, and then they'll be able to maybe write a white paper to inform a class presentation, or maybe even sending that paper to an elected official. And another example, I'm going to paste this one in the chat for you so you can visualize it along with me. Comes from C3 Teachers, which is one of our partners in the C3 framework. And this one focuses on money in politics. And so, it says, does money matter in political campaigns? That's our big compelling question. So, so students are unpacking that big question with smaller questions, and again, performing various tasks. So, as an example, the first supporting question asks, how much does it cost to become a member of Congress? So they may be shocked by that, but there's a lot of data out there for that. You know, in Virginia in particular, we have the Virginia Public Access Project, which is extraordinary for the amount of data that it has. You know, there's Follow the Money. There's lots of other sources that provide these for students, and then with teachers providing these resources, they can start to list how much congressional members are using in their last campaigns. Another one of the questions is, how do super PACs play a role in political campaigns? Those political action committees. And so students can use sources that, like maybe one that is focused on the Supreme Court, one that is focused on the amount of money that is being donated, whether hard money or soft money, via organizations and individuals to campaigns. And then a summative assessment could be that they're going to answer the question again, this big question of, does money matter in political campaigns? So they would then need to construct an argument that addresses that question and use relevant evidence from the data that they have researched and the data that they have analyzed. And then in extension of that, they could even create a public service announcement that addresses students' concerns on campaign finance reform. The inquiry arc here does not dictate what the result will be. We're not saying that, yes, students must advocate against the current system, or they may support the current system. They're using the data to draw their own conclusions and to act on that. So they're using the data to become informed in their civic action. This isn't limited just to the disciplines that often show up in K-12 course titles. We also have a companion document that the American Anthropological Association put together. So if you think about from the anthropological approach, maybe the question could be, how have different groups of people in the United States experienced the recession? And so here again, that question is requiring data. And so we're then compiling data from different stakeholder groups, different demographics on how they experienced the recession. And so then maybe here the action would be, maybe there's a scholarly article that the students can write. Maybe they can appear on radio or write an op-ed or a blog entry. They can again communicate in an informed manner their action, which was again informed by data. Another example. Sorry. Last sentence. Several states, and including in Virginia, require students to take economics and personal finance, and it's very easy to see within those state standards that students are required to analyze data. So I'll stop there because I could continue on forever, but I know that we have Hollylynne to listen to as well and learn from, but it absolutely belongs within the social studies classroom. Thanks for the time.
No, thank you so much, Wesley, because I think that perfectly demonstrated just how wide the possible applications are here, right? And how many potential topics that students could run through as they're leveraging the massive amounts of digital data that we now have online, theoretically at our fingerprints or at our fingertips, but could be made more accessible for inquiry-based projects that could really engage students in formal learning to be able to engage in all these many diverse civic challenges. And Hollylynne, I think that's like the perfect way to transition to some of your work. You've been researching what is needed for mathematics and statistics education, specifically what is needed for educators in the US to be able to impart some of those skills. Maybe a little bit more on the technical side in tandem with some of the topic-based inquiry that students could be doing in social studies. And I'm wondering that, I know you've done, in particular, you've been doing a lot of research examining what real world data scientists are currently doing in industry and in government to unpack and make use of the immense amounts of data that we now have to solve global challenges. So I'm wondering if you could speak to a little bit like what came out during that research. What were some of the critical processes that students might need to engage with data, especially in digital formats, and leverage some of the really powerful tools that we have at our disposal today?
Yeah, thank you, Zarek. So yeah, I'm Hollylynne Lee. So I'm at NC State University, and I'm a teacher educator. So, my focus as a researcher and as a teacher educator is to really kind of understand, particularly with statistics and data science, we're not going to achieve any of the goals that we've started talking about today without the teachers who can actually help our students engage in these kinds of experiences. And, I think we've seen, the one study that Allison was showing earlier, the mapping, experiences of harnessing data are hardly represented at all in the experiences that our students are getting, both in the curricula as well as what students are reporting in that research. And so, until our teachers are better prepared for that, we're not going to make a lot of progress. So, I just got out about an hour ago of teaching my Stat 101 class for future elementary and middle school teachers. And we're talking about a lot of the things that have been brought up already. So, a lot of the research that I've done, and I know we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to go a little quickly here. But I want to share a couple links. My colleagues and I, back in 2016, realized that unless we started changing the undergraduate teacher preparation program to better prepare teachers to actually meet the goals and work with students in interesting ways in classrooms, we weren't going to make much progress. And so we started doing developing materials as well as engaging in research about what these teachers actually understand and how well they're learning. And I dropped a link in here to our project. The first phase of the project for 4 or 5 years was really developing the materials and using it in university classrooms. Understanding the ways in which they were helping or not pre-service teachers and revising those materials and iterating on them. And so we think we've got a pretty nice set of materials. We're now doing some further iterations to those that have not been quite released yet. But because we're ramping that project up to really think about how we're going to work together as a network across universities to actually make change. But one of the more interesting things about our project, and we might be a little unique in this, is that one of our co-PIs and our partners is the Concord Consortium, who have the tool called CODAP. And this is a really easy tool to use online. And because they are a partner with us, you've got researchers and teacher educators helping to design the features that are in that tool. And so that the features that get added to that tool are ones that we know make sense for students and are going to be able to be useful for teachers. And we're able to engage in some of that research and development cycle. And so if you have not explored CODAP, I highly suggest that you do. It's free and it will always be free. But one of the things that Zarek was talking about, so that's my world with pre-service teachers. All right. So there's a lot of us, and I could tell from the introductions, there's a lot of you here that really care a lot and work in the university system with these teacher education programs, whether you're teaching a content course or you're teaching some of those pedagogy focused course. And so, working together is really important with this. But I took a step back starting in 2018, and I decided that if I was going to really start to transition from just being focused on statistics education to be focused on data science education, that I needed to have a better understanding of what data scientists actually do in practice. So I had an opportunity with a local organization where I could spend a lot of my time with them and do a study of what data scientists actually do when they're working with data, when they're harnessing data and they're solving these real world problems. what exactly are they going through? And so my colleagues and I used data from that study, as well as from a comprehensive literature review, to think about what are those key practices and processes. And I'm going to put this in the chat here. The first link is to the research paper. That's really, really long. Don't go to that one yet. If you are ever interested in that, you can go to the longer paper. What I would like you to open up is the condensed poster of the main ideas. All right, so that's the second link that has the CDN as part of the URL. So what we really found out from the speakers that we've already heard about, you heard these ideas coming up today from everyone that's been speaking before me. You know, we need data scientists frame their problems. They go and they collect and they gather data. They harness that data and they have to make sense of it. Sometimes they're measuring it themselves directly. Sometimes they're getting it from other sources. And then they have to process this data. There's a lot of processing of data, organizing and structuring and restructuring of data, because depending on the question that you want to answer, you've got to get your data into a certain format. And then you explore and you visualize it. All right. And visualizing data, we saw lots of different examples. I can't wait to actually go and spend some time on the Factism site and look at some of the visualizations that students have created. I already bookmarked it, so I've got some homework to do. You know, learning how to visualize that and think about how you're going to model your data. And then that last point, communicating and proposing action. We heard definitely that, I mean, the political action, going back to the report from Allison, that we want our students to be able to be politically active and to understand that. We heard that directly from Wesley as well, you know, and that it was certainly coming out in what Mayura was saying about, you know, the story that you tell and how you use data. You've got to propose the right kinds of actions and use the right data to tell that story. You know, so we've got to be really kind of focused on this. And so we wrote the research paper, and then we created this poster as a synthesized way to kind of communicate the different processes that data scientists engage in. And then now below at the bottom, the kind of habits of mind and dispositions that they really take when they're approaching data. So the idea that they're skeptics and that they're curious and that they persevere through all the different munging of the data that they might need to do. And so, you know, we think that this framework, that teachers can take it and adapt it and use it in their classroom, and that it really goes across disciplines to help frame the ways that students engage with data. And so the last thing that I'll share is that not only is my work with practicing teachers, but with pre-service teachers, but we've done a lot of work thinking about how we have lots of teachers that are already in the classroom. How do we get them prepared? And so a lot of the work we've been recently doing, for about 5 years, I was involved in doing MOOCs for educators, massive open online courses. And through studying what teachers did in these MOOCs, we really learned kind of what the high leverage learning experiences that they had that seemed to kind of change their perspectives and make an impact in their classroom. And so we took some of the things that we were doing in MOOCs and rearranged things so that we could create a personal learning environment where teachers are more in charge of their learning, where they choose what they need. And that we could also use a little bit of AI in the background to help give them recommendations based on what we know about them, what they might actually learn best from. And so that platform we just opened to the public last March, and that is instepwithdata.org. And we use the 6-phase framework that was on that poster as a cornerstone framework to help guide teachers' learning in that platform. So those are some of the things that we do here at NC State. I'm also a senior faculty member at the Friday Institute for Educational Innovation, and my colleagues that work with me there are also, you know, part of all of this research, as well as my colleagues from Eastern Michigan and University of Southern Indiana, and lots of different other places. And Data Science for Everyone is one of our key partners in some of the work that we do. So I very much appreciate Zarek inviting me and to be a part of this. So I think I saw a question related to CODAP. Was it about grade levels? So I think that CODAP can pretty safely be used from like grade 4 and on up. And if you haven't checked out Tuva is also another online platform, and they just released Tuva Junior, which actually has some really interesting ways of representing data that can help that transition from a more physical environment to a more data rows and columns structured data environment that CODAP has. So I will stop there and see if Zarek has any further questions for all of us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hollylynne. I think, well, a couple of quick reflections from me just on this conversation so far. Super clear to me that we need even more time to dive into these things in more depth. You all have such incredible, I think, perspectives on this issue. If you are comfortable sharing your contact information, so folks in the community can get in touch with you in the future, they have follow-up questions or they want to get in partner with your respective efforts, please make sure to share that in the chat. And I think another really big reflection from me, just from hearing this conversation so far, is it's so clear that directly both from students, but also from the different lenses that you all are seeing in many, many different places and communities around the world and around our country here in the US, that both students, teachers, and civic society needs data literate individuals, and that we all need to be working toward that goal. And I think the last one that I'll share is that I think both Mayuri and Wesley, you've demonstrated this so well, that there's such a diverse set of topics through which students can engage and learn about data and how to learn the skills and the visualization techniques and the really careful analysis and validation steps they need to be taking in order to make really effective arguments to engage on whatever issue or passion they might have. And so that's why I want to do a segue to carry us home here. If you're an educator listening, or if you're a school leader listening, and really just want to have your students jump into this right away, next week or later this month, I want to bring back Allison to talk a little bit about the student challenge that we're going to launch, so students can begin to explore these topics individually across a number of the examples we mentioned.
Thanks, Zarek, and thanks to everyone who's spoken. Wow, I've literally got links everywhere. I'm going to be exploring all of that stuff tomorrow. So this is, as Zarek says, we're launching a challenge today. It's going to live on that little platform for Factivism that I shared with you earlier. And what we've basically done is we've said, like, we gathered all this data from students last year. Why don't we let that data be part of a learning experience in itself? So we've created a kind of lesson experience with some data sets using that data. And the idea is that students can visualize, look at that data, explore it in the way that they'd like to, and then visualize something from it to make a point that they would like to also share about education and even their own learning. They don't have to use this data. If they'd like to gather some different data about education, survey their own school or whatever it may be, then they could do that too. In the middle there's some examples of the kinds of data visualizations and kind of poster and communications that we've already gathered. It's really cute on the website. You can see it, and the kids can upload them themselves. And we really think it's an amazing chance for young people to be able to look at data, present something powerfully, using that data, and then see it live somewhere. Just to kind of tell you a little bit about what we then go on to do with some of these visualizations is you can see some of these images on the bottom here. Now, some of these were taken of students at the COP Climate Summit in December in Dubai. So one of the things we do is a lot of advocacy around big key global moments and UN moments. We come to New York to the UN General Assembly. We do lots of work like that. And we often use these visualizations and represent the voice of students in this way. So sometimes we do call outs to say, can you, did anyone want to share something? And then we will present it at COP, and we did do that. So it's always great to be able to show students that they're not just doing it, solely for a learning moment, that their voice will really be heard. And genuinely from the work that we do make that possible. So we'd love you to take part, share it widely. And on the next slide, I think is just, there's a link here, but we'll try and make sure that everyone who participated got the link there's a QR code, very smartly been done by Zarek, to the page on our website with all the information. And you don't have to use our data sets, as I've said. Somebody put a NASA link in the chat there. You could use that data too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allison. So you all heard it straight from the source. Student Challenge due March 2nd for the celebrating Open Data Day. We are so excited to partner with the World's Largest Lesson on this Student Challenge. Really also appreciate everyone just joining the conversation today and listening to the perspectives of these amazing global and domestic leaders here on data, advocating for data science and literacy skills. We want to invite you all to continue the conversation on Slack. We'll make sure to share both the challenge details over the chat right now, but then also continue to push that information out with you after the event in our Slack channel and through our newsletter, so you can get easy access to this new student challenge. We also encourage you all to follow our speakers and to connect with us in the Data Science for Everyone community on Twitter, through our newsletter, or through our resource center, which is pictured here, to get in touch with some of the great curriculum and student resources that were mentioned here today. We're all so grateful for you all joining. I want to give a huge round of applause to our speakers. Thank you so much for carving out an hour in your day across a couple of different and very diverse time zones. So really appreciate you making the trip and allowing some time in your schedule to join our conversation. We're super excited to see what your students might produce, and we're really looking forward to continuing to uplift student agency in how we think about our education system and the content that we emphasize. Thank you all again so much for joining. We'll leave the room open just for a few minutes if folks have additional questions over the Zoom chat they would like to answer directly or ask directly for our speakers. And make sure you all share your contact info so folks can continue the conversation afterwards.